my Kiwi, refugee, migrant, woman of colour, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for being on the right side of history today. Yeah. We can't pretend that this was an aberration from overseas. That would be irresponsible. The truth is that this happened here, and it began with hate speech allowed to grow online.
So this is from Fraser on the live stream. I have yet to hear an actual definition of hate speech. Speech that is hateful is not specific enough. There needs to be an objective definition that we can all easily adhere to. Different people have different definitions of what is hateful. What is a quantifiable definition of hate speech?
Paul. In preparation for this, I did look at the definitions of hate speech. They are reasonably consistent. So anything that spreads, incites, promotes, or justifies, and then there's racial hatred, xenophobia, anti-semitism. And of course, what we've done recently is expand that out to include religion, disability, gender, age, sexual orientation. The second part of that is that it incites hate and often violence. Does anybody want to add to?
In the wake of the Christchurch terrorist attacks, the Justice Minister has announced his intention to review hate speech laws, and New Zealanders are calling out objectionable utterances with renewed enthusiasm. But where's the line between free speech and hate speech? And is redrawing where it lies really so simple?
Look, when it comes to what people call hate speech, it's when it tips into the space of causing harm to others. There's a very big difference between criticism and even sharing views that people necessarily wouldn't agree with. There's a very big difference between that and language which is designed to try and incite harm against others. And it's kind of examples where when you see it, you know it.
There is a line between incitement and free expression, but when you get the Prime Minister of New Zealand coming on this show this morning and saying, oh, you know when you see it, well, where's the line now? And the idea that people can be criminalised on the basis of opinion rather than fact is a very,
I agree, we should be wary.
The problem you have when you start to limit free speech and you talk about hate speech is who's the censor? Who's the person that decides that what you might consider to be hate speech might be what I consider to be a reasonable criticism of, say, an immigration policy, for example?
Yeah.
Who's the censor? Who's the person that where they draw the line and they say, you can't say that, you can say that? That is a dangerous power to give to a government.
Yeah. I think there is a period of time when there's high emotion. But we need to rise above that, and especially our officials, especially our ministers, our elected leaders, and our chief censor needs to take a deep breath and really be considered about what's happening here and not take the emotional route.
See, what worries me here is that the more we do this sort of thing, the more we are going to police political views as well. And so if your political view is not my political view, then we might police that.
And Lucy, even books are being taken off the shelves now.
Yes, well, it seems that Whitcoulls has stopped selling the book of Jordan Peterson, his book, 12 Rules for Life. It's down to some extremely disturbing material being circulated both before, during and after the Christchurch attacks.
To this guy wearing a T-shirt saying, I'm a proud Islamophobe in very large capital letters, and the two of them standing side by side, and I seem to remember he had his arm around his shoulder. He may well have done a whole range of pictures, but it was a pretty egregious one, this one.
Very large T-shirt, wasn't it? Yeah. And yet, as people have pointed out, Whitcoulls will still sell Mein Kampf, but they've banned Jordan Peterson.
I think there's a difference there again, a distinction there again between, you know, that historical book and Jordan Peterson's books, which are very much doing active harm at the moment.
We are also on notice now. We have to change the way we do politics.
We're under siege. The terrorists have opened fire, and we will fire back.
The world is watching. We have to get this right.
You were talking about an enemies list. That's not a bad idea.
So we need to call it out, whether it's trolls, whether it's politicians, whether it's media personalities. Yep.
as politicians, we have to do everything we can to prevent this from ever happening again.
I think there's the best of intentions. I just think that they're misguided. I think that if we want to truly stop something like this happening again, we need to understand it.
And so what
we need
can
to
we do?
understand
It's also bureaucrats sitting around the table. What can we do? What can we do here? We need to be seen to be doing something.
Well, this is the broader context, and this is what I was talking about, the emotion that's involved now. And there is a lot of hyperbole at the moment around, and I think we need to take a considered approach. We need to take a sensible approach and not have knee-jerk reactions that possibly take away freedoms of New Zealanders.
What happens when you start banning words, comments, when you start limiting free speech? What happens to those people who might be on the fringes, who might be thinking
they probably go further out towards
into the quagmire, and they go deep underground into your platforms and your chat rooms?
How would tougher hate speech legislation have prevented Christchurch?
Well, I'm not saying that it would have prevented Christchurch, but I think that Christchurch was a huge shock to the country, and it did generate reconsideration of these laws.
The government has quietly, through an opinion column by Justice Minister Andrew Little, revealed that it's reviewing our hate speech laws in New Zealand. In New Zealand, we have sanctions against speech, which incites racial disharmony, okay? But nothing restricting speech on religion. So it seems pretty clear that that loophole, I think, will be closed by the government. It's desperate, this government, to be seen to be doing something to assist the Muslim community. But we must proceed with caution to this. Even a discussion around limiting free speech or beefing up hate speech in the laws makes me nervous, makes me really nervous. There's always some prude who wants to ban everything.
We now know that hate speech allowed to grow and be amplified online is undermining democracy around the world.
We must retain the right to speak openly, to speak freely. It's democracy after all. It's only when you lose it do you realise what you had. Free speech is vital in a free society.
Most New Zealanders would be shocked to find that our hate speech laws don't cover religious minorities.
And let's face it, they don't care if we're really Muslims or not, because this is about race.
We must make New Zealand the kind of place where we all feel truly safe and at home.
It's good to see him so happy. This is an outrageous crime, and someone will answer.
We must always have the right to be critical and open in our language and questions and opinions and viewpoints. If we must review hate speech, let's not allow this to gain a life of its own and go to places we'll regret.
In order for the government to carry out necessary procedures against terrorism, Reichstag must support an enabling act. This act is your opportunity to hand power over those that can wield it most effectively. Freedoms of speech, association, and the press are temporarily suspended. Privacy rights in relation to telephone and postal communication are revoked. Order! Order!
The stale, disaffected, ill-informed voices are no longer relevant.
I will take any refusal as a statement of opposition. Will it be peace or war?
Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles.
Yes, that's true! Israel's behind it! That's right!
Hans, are we the baddies?
Hitler exploited the fire to the full. He prevailed on President Hindenburg to sign a decree. In one stroke, he was able to legally gag his opponents. This was also the last time the aging and senile President Hindenburg was to vote.